I'm Jessica Cardozo interviewing Miss Laura Lane about her experience in the 80s.
This is great. I'm glad you're doing it.
Okay, and you're okay with me recording you?
Absolutely. In July of 1985, Rock Hudson, who was a really successful film star, probably in like the 50s and 60s, really much the 60s, and made a lot of money. I mean, he would be like the Brad Pitt. So in 1985, he collapsed in Paris in a hotel, and he told the press that he had liver cancer. Well, that wasn't true. And there were thousands, hundreds of gay men dying of AIDS at that time. And the next day, I think it was the next day, he actually came out and he said, I have AIDS. And he died in October. So from July to August, September, October, only like 2 or 3 months later. But it just transfixed the United States, because it would be something that I can't even explain how important it was and how upsetting and disturbing. And people were so sad when he died. And they were so sad that not that he was gay, but that he had been silenced. And it really changed everything. That's just my experience. And people started to go, oh my God, a movie star can be gay. And it's weird for us to say that now, because like, it's not a problem.
Right.
But then it was a really big deal. And the fact is, he wanted to hide it. Like the first go around, he's like, yeah, I have liver cancer. And then I think something happened, and he decided to, I think because he was at the end of his life, he was like, hey. So he released this press release, and he came out. And then, so that was in the fall of 85 when he died. In February of 86, I took a course, and it turned out, well, I knew it at that time, but it was the first course that was taught at the college that I was at that had anything to do with lesbian and gay people. And it was literature. Okay. And the teacher who taught it, and this was in Maine, so you gotta get, like, this is very remote. This is like rural, right? And her cat was killed, and all these things. People were up in arms about this course. Whatever. But she took a lot of harassment for it, for just teaching a course. And the reason she did it is because that year before, same year that Rock Hudson died, a man who was trans was thrown from a bridge in Maine into the water, and he couldn't swim. And he was thrown by 3 teenagers. So he basically died. It was like one of the big first times a hate crime was acknowledged. Like these teenagers hated this trans person, and he died in the river. Now, at the time, people didn't even know about trans, so they thought he was gay. So they called him gay. He wasn't. He was trans. Anyway, that's why she taught the course. And I took it. And it was kind of a history-making thing, because she totally rooted it. She said, this is why I'm doing it, is because Charlie Howard was murdered when he was drowned. And in many ways, I think those things kind of shaped like who I am and how I think and what I do. So after that, I came out, actually, this is who I am. That summer, so the summer of 1986, I was waitressing in Maine, and this is the headline. This is July 1st of 1986. High Court, so that's the Supreme Court.
Right.
United States Supreme Court. 5-4 says states have the right to outlaw private homosexual acts. You hardly ever see the word homosexual anymore. I was like, whatever. So basically, the Supreme Court, in this New York Times headline, says states have the right to outlaw private homosexual acts. And I remember when I saw that headline, and this was in the morning, and I remember going, oh my goodness, I cannot believe in these huge letters it's saying that the Supreme Court is outlawing this. Now, that didn't stand, obviously. Like, years later, that was overturned. Everything's changed since then. But it was a really conflictual time. Little other story that I remember today. This is actually a sad story, but it's part of oral history. So this would have been in the fall of '86 and the winter of '87, January, February, March, April. And for whatever reason, I don't know how these things happened, I worked with a whole lot of gay people. And one of them was a young man, and he was a teenager. So I was 22. Yeah, 22. And he was younger than me. And he had a lot of life in him, and he was very talkative and social and all these great things. And he went to the bars a lot, you know. And he got sick. So he didn't come to work, and someone said, you know, he's sick. And that wasn't shocked or anything like that. But he was out for a long... He was not out for a long time, actually. He was not out for a long time. But I didn't see him for a long time. And the thing I would say about this whole time is that everything was silent. Like, everything was silent. Like, no one wanted to talk about anything that had to do with AIDS or being gay. And he died. And he was a teenager. And he died of pneumonia. So I come to work and I ask about him. And they're like, yeah, he died. I was like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Like, I know people who die of pneumonia, but they're like 80, you know? Like, your immune system gets compromised, you're old, and you die, and that sort of thing in the hospital. Well, he died in the hospital. He was like 19. And I remember talking to people and saying, he didn't die of pneumonia. That's not what happened. And they were incredulous to me. In other words, like, I was mad that people were being silent, and they were like, they didn't want to hear about it. Like, people I was working with or people I knew. And I just remember thinking, wow, you know, it's not just in the newspaper that people are being silent or they're not wanting to talk about it, but it's like people that I talk to. And yeah, he died. Because at that time, if your immune system was compromised for a certain period of time, they couldn't do anything about it. And that was, I think the pneumonia was like one of the ways that it caught up with people who had HIV and AIDS. Yeah, in other words, people were walking around and they were not being treated. So anyway, I remember that, and I always think about it because it's not just famous people that you heard about. It was also other people too. There was fear because of openly homophobic attacks, crimes, hate crimes, that kind of stuff I was talking about, like the teacher I had and her cat being killed and the person being thrown into the river and murdered,
Right.
that kind of thing. But then also silence because that was just the way things were. Like, that's how gay people got by, was to be quiet. So Rock Hudson, for example, that's how he lived his entire life. Mm-hmm. His entire life. And then something happened in the last 3 months of his life. And in a way, totally changed everything. Totally changed everything. So that's my oral history for you.
I think that's good.
Yay.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.